Hi, Peter.
Hello.
Good to see you, Peter.
Fun times. Yeah. A lot of good times working together now.
Yes. So, Peter,
Mm,
can you briefly explain about your history as an artist?
okay.
How you started?
Yeah, it's quite expansive in terms of the pathways and roads that I've taken, as many artists will have. Sometimes they have a specific pathway, which is just education only. But of course, there's going to be like family history and whatnot. But in terms of my history of being an artist and how I got to where I am now, it started off with initially family. So things like, where uncles and aunts and my grandparents actually introduced art to me. Even though in the family they had the potential to do art and design, they never pursued it. They were immigrants, coming from the 1970s and 80s. But it allowed me and my next generation to pursue that as it was introduced to me because they had interest, but they never really pursued. So I used to get a lot of drawings and sketches from, my aunts and uncles and grandparents. They would show me things they would have fun with, but that at a young age left a very deep impression, and I wanted to be able to pursue that on my own. So from there, since the age of 5 and all the way till now, as I'm in my 40s, I've been able to sketch and draw and create and produce since then. And then, of course, from education, all the instructors and the support systems. So really, at the end of it, it was the people that got me to where I am now. Not necessarily systems or books or that kind of thing, but the people around me as family and friends and whatnot. Yeah.
So, did you go to school? I mean, for art, or
Yeah, so after people, there was so much encouragement, it then led into the conversations and also interest of doing this in an educated format. I actually went to a magnet high school. So after like grade school and stuff like that, they knew I really wanted to do art. So they put me in positions to experience art and design at a very young age. So even like high school, it was art centric. So magnet art high school. So most of the kids that went to high school at that time were interested in dance, music, acting, arts, sculpting, that kind of thing. So that was an opportunity growing up in Portland, Oregon. So I was able to go into that as enrollment, and from high school and on, it was after high school, it was a college, 2-year college into graphic design. Then Art Center was after that too, from 2001, 2004. And it was been a constant about 6 years of just education after high school into developing design skills at a professional level, hopefully in terms of competition. And I think those schools definitely prepare me as well as they could have. But I think a lot of it is also the student's job to be able to try to put themselves in that position of hunger and drive to attain those skill sets. So just because you go to these schools doesn't guarantee you anything. But I think because again, I had the right people from family, but also the friends and networks I met at those schools, I was able to pursue the dreams that I wanted to go for. So yeah, education was also very much a big staple in to get to where I am now.
so your family were supportive you doing art then?
Very supportive. So, and coming from an Asian family, of course, the cliche story is where you don't get allowed to do that.
Right. I'm surprised.
Yeah, and thankfully, I came from a background where the family was very supportive of it. They've expressed concern when I got older, saying we weren't sure what was going to happen if you're going to make it, but they never showed that to me at a younger age. So everything was always about it's good, keep it going, and have fun. And they gave me the opportunities to experience like workshops or even stuff like this at Kazone. Back then, and in the early '90s, it was very minimal and sparse in terms of how much was out there, but they did exist. Figure drawing workshops or still life kind of things. It was very kind of more traditional fine art kind of stuff, but still it allowed me to get out there to experience what it was like in a community of artists to play with these kind of things. But yeah, it's they allowed me to, and they encouraged it very much so. And that's the weird thing too, because I was the only one that really took advantage of that situation where I had brothers and sisters. I think they also potentially had even like the slight potentialness of being able to pursue art or any sort of like creative field, but they never really did. They had other interests as well. So oddly enough, I'm the only one that really took it that far.
Okay. So, are you the first artist in your family?
In terms of professional, in terms of taking it to this degree of level, yeah, in this generation. There are a few others in the family now who are in the creative field of things like music and otherwise, but and they've taken it pretty far now too. So in my current generation, there's a handful, a few. But in terms of the parents and uncles and aunts, no, there was never anything like that degree. So, they immigrated from Korea back in like what 1977, 78. I was born in 81. And so, being the first also male born in the father side of the family, I was unfortunately spoiled in some cases too. And they allowed me a lot of things that I could go for, but thankfully I was able to take advantage of it.
Wow. So you went to 2-year university prior to Art Center.
Yeah.
What school was it?
So back in the 1990s, the Art Institute had just started at that time. I don't think it exists anymore today, and it's not necessarily seen as a good light anymore. But back when it first started, they had a very good intention. And the structure, the instructors, the admins were very helpful to give me the ideas of how I can pursue education in the future. They knew I wanted to go to Art Center too. They said, come here, we'll help you establish a lot of your fundamental basics of things, and we'll help you send you off to Art Center. They were like that. So they were all in the pursuit of helping individual students to get to the next steps of things. So it was the Art Institute in Portland. And they didn't really have like design, like entertainment kind of stuff. I actually went into the graphic design department. So right after high school, this is 1999, 2000, I went into the 2-year program, associate's degree in graphic design. So I spent 2 years there doing that. And we had illustration techniques like figure drawing kind of stuff as well, very minimally. But it was a lot of like layout, graphics, font, using computers and digital stuff. But there was a wide array of experiences, even like photography and animation if I wanted to. And I got to experience those small things at that school. So I actually really benefited from that. I think if I went from high school to Art Center, I probably would have sunk, honestly. It probably would have been very hard to survive off of, one, just being very young, and being the fact that I just didn't really know what I really wanted to do, and being introduced and having a moment to kind of mature a little bit, even just a couple years, I think really helped me establish a better chance of surviving at Art Center. So today, after now teaching at Art Center for 10 years and having students from 18 to 19 to 20, and that age coming as a more standard average, I can see how much they struggle. And it's unfortunate because it's just one of those cases where, all you want them to do is succeed, and it's not to their fault. They try as hard as they can, but I just don't think they had the chance to really mature into themselves. Not that they didn't have the potential skill set or technical kind of ability, but it's more about being a person at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Physically, mentally.
Both, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So how did you prepare your portfolio for Art Center?
I barely kind of remember what it looks like in a portfolio, but I will say this. Art Center did a lot of outreach programs in different schools and brands. So in Portland, Nike was the big thing out there. So Nike also held college campus kind of days. So they would invite colleges from all around the nation, and Art Center would be there to table and to present and talk about the school. So I and a friend of mine from high school would go there to visit these places to find out more about it. And that's how I found more about Art Center, because these college campus kind of days. From there, I never visited Art Center. I just kind of found out more through people that were there. And then I went to the 2-year college thing, and then I applied for Art Center through the actual just portfolio standard requirements of what I needed to have. I just did the best that I could. I mean, I was the only one kind of interpreting that. But, well, actually, no. I mean, being at that campus day kind of thing, they did give us recommendations of like, make sure your portfolio has this and this and this kind of thing. It's very basic, but it still worked. And I was able to get into it. No scholarship. But I think out of my entire time when I was at Art Center, I applied for a scholarship multiple times, but actually I was denied it. I didn't get scholarships.
I don't believe it.
No,
Really?
no. I tried many times. And so, to where I am now in my skills, where I feel very confident in it, I started off in an area where I felt like I was very weak too. Like I didn't think I was as good as my friends. I didn't necessarily have the advantage of things like scholarships and stuff like that. And I always felt like I was a bit behind in some things, like digital skills and whatever the case is.
It's hard to imagine because when I met you, you were like already TA.
That was, 3 years in maybe at that point?
Maybe.
So yeah, I felt probably a bit better, but in the very beginning, I was like, I didn't know what to do,
So you did progress your skills throughout the Art Center?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I think the progression at Art Center was there because, again, mentors, instructors, that kind of thing. But the right people and the right friendships, which I think every student at Art Center will have that little clique they form in the first day they meet people. And that's really the reason why you go to schools like that.
Right.
Today, that kind of technique and skill set can be found elsewhere, but you can never still beat out the idea of networking and friendships you'll build when you go there. Not just Art Center, but in schools in general.
So what did you major in Art Center?
So what I majored in at Art Center was mostly illustration, but I also hybrided it with product design. So when I took illustration, I was there for about 1.5 years, and Norm, my mentor, when I took dynamic sketching the first time, said, you should come into VisCom 4 in the product side of things. He always told me later on, it's like, I always saw you as a product designer. I was like, okay, I guess. So it's just the way, way I thought, or the way I kind of logically planned things in design. But he always thought that was the thing that I wanted to do, or thought I should do. So he invited me into the VisCom 4 version. So then I got introduced to the world of design of products. Because in Art Center, you kind of are contained in a bubble.
Yes.
You go to the department, you stay there, you find your friends, and maybe you find a couple other people in different departments, but you don't really experience those different areas unless you try to actually cross that tape and take those classes. So I did. In my 2nd or 4th term, I took VisCom 4. And so VisCom classes, visual communication, in product design is set up to 6 different VisComs. So it's like basis of perspective, still life drawing, dynamic sketching, which is a standard curriculum in the program. where illustration, dynamic sketching is a elective. You can just choose to take it. So after I took it the first time, he said, come into it. But that experience opened up my eyes about what true design process really is, how to research, how to present, which illustration students, we don't really do very well, you know? So it's a hybrid, I think, now, because it was definitely elements, majority-wise illustration, but definitely a lot of elements of also product too. Yeah.
And after that, you went on entertainment.
Yeah. Yeah, so in Art Center, I went into entertainment after first establishing the illustration side of the fundamentals, the basic figure drawing kind of things, composition, value, color painting. And then, you know, you're given the options of taking additional classes that can be more curated to specifically what you want to do in the industry. We didn't have the labels, you know, we didn't have the whole entertainment track or subsets. We just took classes that basically gave us that push towards that direction. So we had to find them by word of mouth. Back then, 15, 20 plus years ago, those classes were all based on someone took it, they say, oh, that was great information. Hey, here's what we did. And then we took it because someone told us. So I only took dynamic sketching because a friend told me to. Say, hey, this is right up your alley. If she didn't tell me, I would have maybe never taken it. So we had to really rely upon each other to give us the information of where to go. Today, it's all built curriculums. You know what classes to take. They tell you where to go. But back then, it was all kind of a shot in the dark.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So did you get a job through Art Center then?
No.
How did you get your first job?
So how I got my first job was luck and timing. And it's kind of unfortunate to hear that sometimes as a student. You think, well, so then it's just luck then? Not necessarily. I'm saying there's an aspect of what we do in our world where you have to be in the right spot at the right time, and hopefully it's on your side. But to make it successful, to have a higher percentage of it to work, you got to actively put yourself out there. You got to actively work really hard. You got to hustle constantly. If you sit there and twiddle your thumbs, then nothing will happen. Luck is against you. But if you're super active in putting yourself out there, then the chance is much higher. The crossing of that path I talked about in some of the classes. So after I graduated, I applied for a bunch of jobs. And today, what I tell my students is that if there's a group of people in there, 80% of you may not get what you want. You graduate, what happens if you don't get that job? You know, everyone has dreams of like, oh, I want to work at like Disney or, you know, these kind of game studios. And I had dreams of work at Pixar. I wanted to go to Pixar actually after I graduated. I had all the right contacts. My portfolio was built for it. And, you know, Norm knew everybody there. He knew Rob Kondo and Harley Jessup. And I talked to those people. Graduated, tried to submit for it, nothing. Pretty much flat out denied. It's like, I'm sorry, it's just not good enough. And so I thought, man, I thought I was prepared. I thought I was ready. But so I've learned this idea of rejection constantly too. And, you know, scholarships didn't work out so well. You know, certain relationships with people I try to build, but, you know, it wouldn't really follow through. And even professionally, it didn't start off very smoothly. I didn't work for 6 months after Art Center. So I had friends who were graduating, like, oh, they got a job right after graduation. I was in that category of 80% of people who did not work. So that's why I didn't tell people and students today, you are in that general category now that you will not get the job you want. There's a small percentage, and that's what you're seeing. Oh, they went to that studio, they went to that studio. That's what I want. Of course you do. Everybody wants it. But that's such a small percentage. The majority are sitting there trying to find out where to go. So we all have the same dreams, you know? So I didn't get that. And so Pixar was kind of like gone now, and then I was trying to apply for different studios here and there in LA. Nothing was happening. So I sat there and was like, what do I do next? And I went back to Art Center. I went and sat in on classes with Norm and sketching and drawing because I wasn't working. So I was still producing like content and portfolio stuff, updating my work all the time. So I was actively putting myself out there. But I had nothing else to do because classes were done. And the weirdest feeling is, of course, I'm sure you know, when you finish Art Center, all of a sudden you have all the time in the world.
Yes.
And it's very weird and jarring, you know? So I sat there producing more work and I said, I might just go back to Art Center. I kind of miss it because all my friends were still there. I graduated a term earlier than everybody.
Oh,
So I went through Art Center in 3.5 years.
oh, so you didn't take any break?
I took one break
Oh.
and I went to PCC and took more classes there. Then everything else was straight through. So I finished Art Center very fast. So I graduated, you know, with a couple friends here and there, but the majority of my friends were still at Art Center. So I actually went back and spent another like months of term just sitting in classes because the teachers would let me in. And then by chance, there was a company that contacted me saying, hey, are you available for work? And we saw your stuff on a Blogspot. I had a Blogspot. I didn't even have a website. I had a Blogspot. So they saw my sketches and drawings and they said, you know, you seem to draw tanks really well. It's like, we have a project that's all about tank, you know, designs. Do you want to work on it? I don't know how they found me. It was just basically like word of mouth maybe. They saw somebody showing my stuff to them. I didn't apply for the job. They came to me. So again, there was a high chance where they wouldn't have seen it through some other means, but thankfully they did. And so that was my first working opportunity in freelance 6 months after graduation. And I went in-house to work for about 3 or 4 months, and then they hired me full-time.
And what company was it?
Technicolor in Burbank.
Wow.
So Technicolor is known for their music and sound and all that kind of stuff in movies, but they had a game division. So they're an outsourcing company now. So I worked in the concept department for about 2.5 years until they let me go. So
2.5 years.
yeah, my first job was 2.5 years, and it was a freelance gig at first. Then it became a full-time job after that. And it wasn't the highest paying, but I had to take what I could, at that point. I figured games would be a certain opportunity, but it wasn't my first intention. Again, animation was really what I want to go to. But at this point, after then going in games, after 7 years, I never worked in animation until after I finished all that up. And then eventually I did some stuff in animation. But that's the thing, it's like, you may not get what you want now, but if you work at it, maybe you'll get that opportunity later. So what you have to do is find a way to adapt and use your skill sets to find some sort of opportunity to get you going. Thankfully, there was luck and timing on my side, but I was also active on constantly pumping out work and putting it there. So it's a combination of all those elements. For some people, like I said, they'll get it right away, but it wasn't for me. Yeah.
So after Burbank, I remember you living in San Diego.
Yeah.
Was it for a job?
Yeah, it was for a job. So after I got laid off from Technicolor, because they had a lack of work, that's the nature of the way the industry is.
And especially outsourcing companies.
For sure.
Yeah.
And as a young person, as an amateur or junior concept artist, it's scary finding your first job, but it was more terrifying losing it. Because now I'm like, what do I do? So because the thing is, after I left Technicolor, I actually didn't really have anything to show. Because 2.5 years afterwards, all that work from Art Center, I got rid of. It's not really valid anymore. But the 2.5 years of working at the company, actually, I wasn't really fully satisfied with the work. What happens is, for a lot of people, but also happened to me, again, I had these unfortunate, elements of kind of falling into that trap, but I got comfortable very fast. You think you work really hard and build discipline at Art Center, you're gonna be super on point, on edge. You came home, it's like, oh, I'm just gonna rest, watch movies, play games, kind of stuff. And at work, I do 9 to 5, come home, do nothing. So I didn't really push anything on myself. I got comfortable very quickly. So I did my work, and I did the work to just finish it. I wasn't super into it. And there was only one project that I liked from the entire 2 years of being there. And it was the first project that I worked on, the tank thing. Everything else was kind of like, whatever. So after I got laid off, I had nothing to show for it, no work. So I had to spend 5 months rebuilding an entire portfolio. And so I applied for a bunch of jobs all over the US, and I landed one in San Diego. So I moved for the work. So yeah, I was there for them for a number of years in multiple different studios in San Diego, which eventually I then left the industry overall. Yeah.
So what company was the next one after?
Technicolor was the first in Burbank. Then I went to a place called Bottle Rocket Studios. And that was, Bottle Rocket. So we were working on a game called Splatterhouse. It was a remake of an old side-scroller game, horror film. I met some really good people. I really enjoyed it. I was only there for 10 months and then got laid off. This is what I started to learn about the industry. It's a merry-go-round. You're constantly on and off, on and off. And in San Diego specifically, it's such a contained environment also too. So those individuals are constantly rotating through studios. There's only a handful of them. So Bottle Rocket is where I went to initially. They mismanaged that project kind of poorly. So they ended up laying off tons of people. So from there, I got hired on immediately because I knew a friend. I don't know if you ever knew him, Ari Bailo. And Ari was an art director over at Tryon Studios in San Diego also. They were making a large MMORPG sci-fi. And so I applied for that job because I knew Ari, the art director, and I had the same portfolio that I had made from before. So I showed that stuff, and I had stuff from Splatterhouse, the game, and they took me on. So I transitioned from being laid off on that week, and then the weekend after I started that job out at Tryon. And I was there for about 3.5 years.
Oh wow, that's a long time.
It was longer. So I started very early in the production, which I think is kind of rare in the industry. Typically you walk in, you're looking at something that's been worked on for about a year. For me, I came in very early to the point it was all kind of blue sky still.
Which is a fun stage.
It is a fun stage. So there's a lot of overall process of trying to develop a look. And so I was from the very beginning helping establishing that, which is why I was there for so long. But eventually I also left that place and went to Sony in San Diego. So there were definitely several studios I was trying to hit, and Sony in San Diego was one of them. They were also doing outsourcing basically for cinematics. So I worked on that for a couple of different titles at Sony as well. The art director there was a good friend of mine from Bottle Rocket days. So what you start to realize then is you pick up on not just the fact that it's a short run and merry-go-round, but it's all about then who you know at that point. And yes, it does matter in the very beginning when you're a student too, but you start to really build those connections, rely upon them more as you get older, as you go along. But yeah, that was my stint in San Diego at that point.
Wow. So how did you get into teaching teaching? Did you always wanted to teach?
No, I didn't think I would be teaching if at all. But I think what I will say is this. I've told this story many times about, Norm, mentor, he passed away in 2010. It fell on my lap from there. But what I will say is that I think I was groomed for it without me even realizing it. So Norm, my mentor, who I met at Art Center, we became good friends. Obviously he's handled many students and generations, not just me, of course, and a lot of other students who made very good successes of themselves. And we became close and very much family-like. I got to know him, his kids, his family. So I spent a lot of time with them at school. And after he had passed is when Art Center came to me saying, hey, would you take over for what he's doing? But at the time when he was alive, he would bring me in for a lot of these chances to teach with him. So not just at Art Center, we would do things like high school visits.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, we'd go to local schools in California and we'd just do workshops together, doing dynamic sketching stuff. Young kids, some kids were first grade, second grade to high school as well too. So I helped them along in communicating, and he would ask me to also demo and speak to do it. As I would also walk around doing feedback. It started off first as TA work at Art Center, but then it was about incorporating me to his actual stuff he does outside of it. We had even, before he passed away in 2010, in 2009, we had talked about going to Korea. Because he had a contact in a university in Seoul, and they had come over to Art Center to see what they were doing, and he was good friends with them. We were supposed to go together to do a workshop in 2009, but then the avian flu hit. The H1N1, the bird flu. Yeah. So that closed all the borders. And so they can cancel the workshop. And so when that canceled, then of course in March is when he passed away. But since then, I had asked Norm, it's like, do you mind if I teach a class? Because CDA had asked me to come over to teach a class. Word of mouth. Rodney Fuentabella, who was a friend from Art Center, was teaching at CDA. And Kevin Chen was asking, do you know anybody who can teach a class in sketching? So Rodney said, go to Peter. Because he knew Norm, he knows his process. So they asked me. And I asked Norm, do you mind if I take dynamic sketching and teach it at CDA? Because at that time, dynamic sketching was only available through him at Art Center, nowhere else. Yeah. So he said, of course, go teach it. Because we had also talked about, I would like for you to come to Art Center and teach. You can teach dynamic sketching. I want to do an advanced version. We had these conversations back in 2008, 2009. So he always, I think, saw me as wanting to be a part of instruction and teaching. So I think he was grooming me for it. But I didn't realize this. I wasn't aware of it.
I always would think that you always would want to or imagine to become an instructor because you're so good at it.
Well, that's the thing is when I tell my parents this, they're always shocked by it. Because if you know me who I am really, in terms of just being naturally around me, you know that when I'm on the spot and I got to work, I'm very good at being on. But naturally, I'm more just kind of quiet and reserved, and I don't really speak if I don't need to, So my parents are always kind of surprised, we're always surprised that you're a teacher. How do you sit there and talk when you didn't really talk when you were younger, Right. So they're always kind of surprised by that. In actuality, I was always very scared of presenting. I didn't like speaking in front of publics. Oh, I remember in high school, I would do presentations and stuff. I'd be shaking like a leaf. And it was nerve-wracking. But again, it was a very slow progress. And teaching-wise, it took a minute to get more comfortable. I would say about a good year, even just to feel comfortable. That first year was really, really rough, especially when Norm had passed away. Because the problem that I had in teaching was that I would try to replicate what he was doing. And I'm not him. So I was always concerned, am I good enough to do what he did? Why would even people want to listen to me? And this is the thought behind, I think, certain introverts, or even for me personally, where I come from a mind frame of, I don't want to speak up because why would people listen to what I want to say? I always put myself lower than everybody else. It was always in the mindset of making everyone else feel comfortable. So if I had to just stay quiet or just do what I do, I would. So I wasn't very good about speaking up on things. So then when I was put in the position to teach, it always felt like, will those students even care? Will they listen to what I'm trying to say? Do I even know how to say it properly? And then it was about, well, what would Norm do? How would he draw this? How would he say that? But that's not right because I'm not him. Right. So I had to find the way after a year to be like, this is not working. Even though it's okay, it's passable, but I'm pretty sure they can tell that I'm just now spilling information based on what I've seen and copied from his work. So then after about a year, I started to learn how to really speak for myself. This is still Norm's foundation in his echo because this technique is not a style. It's also not something he originated, but he's the one that kind of pieced it together from multidisciplines of things. And he labeled it that class. So I still say it's an echo and origin from Norm, but now I've gone through it for 10 years of teaching. It's mine. I've gone through the process of filtering it to the point where I know how to speak about it the way I want to. I've streamlined the entire thing. So it's an echo of him, but now it's also me. And so that confidence now boosts up because you take a stand for yourself. And it's no longer about being in the shadow of something else too,
Yes.
So that's really kind of how the teaching kind of started for me.
That's amazing. It's a really great story.
Yeah, it is a rough start, but yeah.
Yeah, it was a rough start, but then it's a great story because it gradually happened. But then people who have no idea, the history of how
Yeah,
that
of
started,
course.
they'll just be like, oh, he went to art center because he really wanted to become a teacher.
Right.
It could. I think people would think that way because you're so good right now.
Possibly.
But then the obstacles and unfortunate event that you actually had to take on the responsibility.
Yeah.
That's really amazing, though.
And the thing about stuff like that with the responsibility is that people think, well, did you gradually shift also your thinking and the way you present? In some cases, but there are also other parts where I had to just change overnight. I had to make those choices right then and there. And even though I felt uncomfortable, I was aware of those choices and I had to do it. Again, just walking in front of people and speaking to them. It wasn't like, oh, I'll get better and a little bit of practice here and there. It's like, no, I got to just start tomorrow.
Right.
So there wasn't a chance for me to sometimes grow. I had to actually change it overnight. And that's a very, there's no way for me to instruct in how to tell people how to do that.
Right.
It's very much just on the person to make that decision to do it. Yeah.
Wow. So I know you have more than 10 years of teaching, but I know now you host your own class. So can you please explain us, how to get that information, what you teach?
I'm still very much involved with, schools, locations, whether international and domestic, and I always will be. Whether it will be things like Art Center or here at Kazone or whatever the place is. I want to be because I find that kind of building a relationship with people to be the most important thing. Everybody can definitely still have their own stuff, their own school, their own brand, but in our field, it's all about being able to help the next generation. That's the main focus, So why wouldn't you want to work with each other and collaborate? And there's enough people out there, enough work that everyone should be able to be a part of it. So for me though, after I taught at these schools for over 10 years, I wanted that sense of more of ownership of the content and also control of my scheduling and being able to also quality control things as well too. So the school that I run now on my own platform, if you just go to peterhanstyleart.com, is where I put all the registration stuff up. Social media is why too I put the registration, but I run everything on my own. So I think the trend these days is about independent artists now developing their own classes. And the schools will still exist no matter what, because it's a platform to kind of bring everyone together, especially in a physical format. As an online thing, we'll see how long it lasts, especially as more content of it is being online and streaming through YouTube or whatever the case is. And I think independent instructors want to definitely have a lot more control, but that's if they want to become an instructor first. I consider myself more of an instructor than now an actual professional like artist per se. I still do it, but it's a secondary thing. So per year, I'll take on like 2-3 actual freelance contract jobs because I still want to be involved in the industry.
Right.
But I decided that I want to become more of an instructor primary first, and the other thing is support. Because being involved in the industry gives me the information of the current trend to teach things properly. So if you're an instructor in the field, you should be still involved with the field. But the problem is that today with many schools, it's professionals being brought in to be instructors. So the primary focus is still their job.
Yes.
Teaching is secondary.
Right.
So their investment to actually knowing how to teach properly or do it in a way that can be efficient is built over time after a long time. But if they're new teachers, they're not going to be that proficient at it because again, that's not their focus. So that was something that I had to make that decision to at some point. And it's not an easy one because I don't want to lose that part of like, oh, I'm going to bring it part of the industry. I still am, but I've also realized teaching is really what I've been called to. One, it's because of the response. People obviously tell me that seems like what you're really good for. And I've listened, so I listen. But thankfully, I still have other outlets because, things like Superani and the publishing and the freelance work, and then of course the teaching, is a juggle act of all those things, but they feed into each other.
Yeah.
They definitely feed into each other. So I don't certainly separate or partition those things, and they're not entities of their own. That just would drain me. They work into each other. But there is still a hierarchy as it goes into play. So my own online classes I run right now are going to stay online for the moment, but hopefully I'll still have, like I said, involvements with places like this.
Right.
So, yeah.
So can we talk about your relation and relationship with Superani? How did you get in? How you got
So in terms of the relationship with Superani and the history behind how I got into it, it sounds simple enough, but I'm sure there's a lot of little variables of things that I would pick up on. And it's like, oh, that was something that kind of helped me maybe get closer. And I get a lot of questions from people. It's like, how do you get in there? It's like, I want to be a part of it. And of course, it's not like an open invite, but at the same time, I think it's very much this idea of people. Again, for me, when I started with education and also what I do with classes and how I started, family, friends, all that kind of stuff was a big part of why I was encouraged to do what I do. So I think it's also just about finding right-minded people. So Superani to me was also people that I just felt connected to, just at a human level. Not just because they were the best in what they did. Yeah, I can appreciate that also, but they were just cool people. And because we saw each other annually at either shows, and of course I had friends from history and all that kind of stuff, you as well too. I think it built that opportunity and chance to just get to know them. And I had no interest of like saying, I gotta be Superani. That was never a thought. It was just more like, oh, I just saw these people every year. We hung out, grabbed dinner, draw and sketch. Great. And if I am, fantastic. If I wasn't, that's fine too. Because the thing is, every artist in Superani is independent still. Yes. They still develop their own stuff. They still push their own jobs. But Superani is there to help assist and to basically get your stuff out there more in eyes and to collaborate as a collective to be stronger united. Because you can still be strong independently. But with that kind of mindset and bringing those forces together, then we now have something that we can actually leave an impression within the timeline of our art history, So being a part of that is very fortunate. I feel very happy to be a part of that kind of thing. Again, I didn't ask for it, but I am very happy to be pushing as hard as I can to promote the brand in a very positive way. For me, my mindset was, how can I help you guys?
Right.
How do I benefit Superani?
But the thing is, the group of artists that we have, there's such a mutual agreement that
Exactly.
we want to benefit each other.
Right.
I think that's the core.
Yeah. And that's what I tell people, like, this is not a job. This is not a company per se. We don't sign contracts and we're officially, doing something. Of course, there are parts of that when you get to those next stages of things. Yes. But in the beginning, it's about just speaking with each other and getting to know each other as to how we can help. And on both ends, Yes. So as the artist, I also am thinking very much, and not concern-wise, but I want to make sure I can be the best that I can be. Because as I see that group of collective, what I tell students these days is that I feel like I've jumped from one pool into another one. In the pool, I'm now surrounded by giant sharks, So guys like Carl and guys like Nicholas and, Kim Jong-gi are just like gigantic sharks, are just like so good. And people can say, but you're also really good too. But, personally for me, as an artist, as we are all generally modest, it does feel like I was in one certain pool that I got a good sense of what I got. And now I'm jumping into this thing. It's like, now I got to swim with them, so I have to really push even harder. So that kind of evolution, it doesn't scare me, it excites me. So that's why I felt very happy about that. And so I can't wait to see what else happens.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So today we had a lecture at Kazone. We haven't done an in-person workshop since COVID hit.
Yeah.
So we were very excited to have you here. How was your experience?
Yeah, so it's been 2 years since I've had any sort of in-person workshop, and thankfully here at Kazone, we've had our first one now after that time. I was honestly excited underlying-wise, but I didn't really know how excited I was at first. Because you kind of go back into the rhythm of, oh yeah, workshop tomorrow. I'll show up and do the thing. But then you get here, you see the people. It's like, oh shoot, this is what it's like again. And I kind of missed that. I forgot what it was kind of like. As I spoke about it earlier in the beginning of the workshop, it's like I told the people here, it's like how I gain the energy is through them. I can't get it online. I see it in their faces. I see it when I'm sitting next to them, how they respond and how they talk about things. And so I can be physically tired when I teach and stuff, but then internally, mentally, I feel super energized. Right now, we've been speaking 6 hours straight. I can go for another 6 hours. And that's not difficult for me, But it's because of the fact that I'm so energized by people now. So I haven't really changed, but I've added to my core what I am. I'm introverted normally, but I'm also being able to learn how to adapt but absorb as well too. Because most people who are extrovert like to expend energy and give it out, but I absorb it and I can also give it. So I kind of have now a two-way street and knowing how to control and throttle that. So that's why I never really feel endlessly tired in any way. I feel endlessly energetic. So the workshop being the first one now after a couple of years, it reminded me back of like, yeah, this is why I like it so much. And so before that, I was doing so much of it before 2020. I was, again, international. In 2020, I had plans of multiple countries to go to. So when everything shut off, I think for some people, they kind of went into a spiral where it became a little bit depressive and like you weren't going out. For me, I found more of myself of what I wanted to do online with my classes. So I was still very successful. I was happy. But I did miss this opportunity to travel a bit. But thankfully, even just domestically, we can do this again.
Yes.
So it was a very exciting workshop, and I think people seem to have enjoyed it.
I think it's great.
It was a good response.
Yeah.
And I think because of the fact that I've been now, doing this for so long, I can read people certain ways, but I also know how to converse and respond and basically give advice in ways in which it fits to them personally.
Right.
And it makes it feel as if I'm trying to really connect to them. It's not just a cut and dry, do this, now go kind of thing. It's like, well, who are you and what are you trying to do? So that's, I think, what's good about the in-person stuff. It makes it much more intimate and really like an actual, a real class.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So since you enjoyed it, if we invite you again, would you come?
Of course I will.
You have it in recording, so.
All right, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, we had it packed anyways before this, so we talked about it.
Awesome. Well, it was great having you here. Thank you so much, Peter.
Okay, thank you, Kazone. Appreciate you guys. So Superani again, 2022 and 2023. We'll keep pushing. We'll do a lot more stuff.
Yes. All right.
Cool.
Thank you.